So welcome everyone. My name's Natalia and I will be your host for this webinar. Thank you for joining us. We've got a really packed session for you this afternoon. We'll be covering an introduction to our MBBS course at St. George's in this session. We'll also be looking at the application process and entry requirements and why you should choose us. We'll also hear from some of our current students on both our undergraduate and graduate entry medicine programs. And they'll be able to tell you a little bit more about their journey into medicine and also student life at St. George's. So we have a broad range of panelists for today's session, and they'll each be able to offer you a unique perspective on St. George's, and they'll all be taking part in the Q&A session that we will have at the end of the session. I can see some of you have already sent in your questions, which is great. Please do keep sending them in. Thank you for those of you who have submitted a question in advance of this session. And we have, where possible, tried to incorporate that in our presentation. So we hope we do answer all of those questions. But again, as I said, if you have further questions, please do use the question box. Use it throughout the session. Ask as many questions as you want. Or if you want us to elaborate on anything, we are here to help and here to answer any queries you may have about the courses and really to inform you about St. George's. So just to note, this webinar is part of a series of webinars, which you can find out about kind of on our website. So they're regarding all of our other courses. So if you're interested in any of those, please do sign up. And in particular, we will have a session on the 7th of October covering student finance and admissions. So that presentation would be great to sign up to complement this presentation if you have any further questions on admissions or specifically applying for student finance, and that would be the best place to answer those questions. I'd now like to introduce you to some of our members of our course team panel for this session. So I'd like to ask them to join me on camera. So we have Dr. Laura Byrne, who is one of our course medical admissions tutors, and she's also a consultant in HIV medicine. We also have Judith Ibsen, who is our deputy course director. I'd now like to hand over to Judith, who will tell you a little bit more about our course.
Big welcome to St. George's, and it's my privilege just to take you through the course structure and the highlights of the course, so you can make a decision about whether you'd like to apply here. We've put a lot of effort into the course over the last year, and we're very pleased to see that the student experience for the course has really increased. I think 17 places in 2019 on the GMC survey. So we're very pleased our hard work and investment is being paid off in terms of happier students. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to cover the course structure, the main themes of the course, and the learning technologies and teaching strategies we have to get you to be a competent and confident practitioner in 4 or 5 years' time, depending on which course you choose to apply to. I'll talk a bit about career development during the course and how you'll be assessed, and then I will hand over to my colleague, Dr. Byrne, who will tell you about admissions. Next slide, please. So I think what we're really good at George's is producing confident, competent doctors who are ready for the complexity of medicine in the 21st century. One of the things I like to do is to meet our F1s and ask them how well prepared they feel to be in practice, being accountable for patients and looking for patients. And they are usually very confident, very happy with the training they have, and particularly because of the trust and accountability they experience as a final year students and the year before that, they feel ready to take on the demands of an F1 job. So I would say that we transform people during the curriculum in order to become those confident and competent doctors. Next slide, please. You'll know this from the website, so I'm not going to go into this in great detail, but there are 2 streams, and I very much hope we've got potential applicants from both at the webinar. It looks a bit like a chromosome, our course structure. So the thing which varies between the two streams is that we have a 2-year clinical science segment of the course for the 5-year stream and a 1-year clinical science segment of the course for the graduate stream. Those meet in a really interesting year called the transitional year, where you'll have the opportunity to learn from clinicians and also scientists to discuss the pathophysiology of cases as well as the clinical presentation of cases, both in PBL sessions and also on clinical placements themselves. And then you go into the more apprentice style years of the penultimate year, which is a specialties year, and the final year, which is really about polishing you to prepare you for practice as a foundation doctor. You'll note from the black diagram that you can intercalate if you're on the 5-year stream, really at any point. So most normally people would do it after the 2nd year of clinical science, but you can also do it after T year or after the P year as well. Next slide, please. I think we'll talk about COVID in a bit. Now, like many medical schools, I don't think you'll find this too different from most places. We divide the curriculum up according to bodily systems. So, for example, life control is all about the brain and the nervous system. Life cycle is about the reproductive system and childhood. So on both programs, you'll go through some structured teaching through those body systems, and we will focus in each of those modules on the professional knowledge you need, the sciences, what you need to know about how those diseases present in patients, populations, and how society deals with them. We'll also teach you the integrated professional skills for those bodily systems. So, for example, in life cycle, we would teach you gynecological examination. And finally, throughout all of the modules, we'll be teaching you those generic professional capabilities you will need to be a highly competent and highly renowned professional doctor. So those 3 themes run all the way through the different modules which are focused on a bodily system. Next slide, please. I'm not going to go into this in too much detail. I think we're very similar to other places. There is, as you know, a large volume of basic science knowledge you need in order to be a proficient doctor: anatomy, physiology, genomics, pharmacology, clinical science, pathology. And we teach that at the micro and macro level as well. And you need that knowledge in order to build your clinical communication skills for the relevant domains as well. Next slide. I think I've already touched on professional knowledge. So this is about understanding the presentation of disease in individuals, families, societies and cultures. It's also about the professional knowledge you need, which are not scientific in a true sense, but things like medical ethics and the law as it relates to medicine, statistics, how medicine is regulated by the General Medical Council, etc., and your professional duties as well. Next slide. And then finally, we've got a comprehensive teaching theme which goes all the way through the course right till the final year, where you learn about your professional duties and perspectives and actually how to be a doctor in the workplace, as well as have the knowledge to be a doctor. There's a comprehensive strategy of giving you feedback on your performance in all your clinical placements that intensifies as you get ready for that final year. And that feedback on what you're really good at, but also areas you need to develop, is why I think our graduates are feeling confident and competent in the final year. Next slide. We have a broad base of technology enhanced learning, which stood us in very good stead when COVID struck early this year. We have a new Canvas virtual learning environment where you'll have access to all your course materials and resources. We don't recommend 24 hours a day, but it is there for 24 hours a day if you want it. In the transitional year, you'll transition to using virtual patients for your problem-based learning. And we have similar technologies that you'll find at other universities, such as recording all lectures for you to look at a later time if you want to go over them. We've got some massive open online courses which you can have a look at now and do if you like. They're free to do. 16 courses such as organ transplantation, etc., that enhance our course, and various other e-learning resources. And as I say, these were a great start to the transition to remote teaching that we were forced to do from March to July this year. Next slide, please. Again, I'm not going to go into this in great detail, but we use a wide variety of teaching methods on the course, and that can be 1-to-2, 1-to-1 on placements, to small groups, to lectures, practical classes in our dissecting room, the anatomy and the pathology museum, interprofessional learning, visits into the community, and areas of the curriculum where you will do some self-directed learning. And you can see a picture on the top right there of our students enjoying their surgical skills practical, which is, I think, the only university we are that does the Royal Surgical College's surgical skills certificate for all students as well. So you can see some people learning to suture there. Next slide. And just to say, as I mentioned earlier, we were very well set up to go into remote teaching once COVID struck, both in the clinical science years and also in the clinical practice years as well. So we're able to transition to virtual anatomy practicals. We did CBL, case-based learning and problem-based learning through Teams, and our clinical teachers developed some brilliant virtual ward rounds, virtual patients for people to taught on in the clinical attachments as well. Next slide, please. Now, you might ask, what are the differences in how we teach between the 4-year and the 5-year course? And you'll see from the next 2 slides that we have a structure for each of the streams week. And the big difference you'll notice is that there is less time for lectures on the 4-year stream compared with the 5-year stream. So the 4-year stream is based on problem-based learning from year 1. That's where a group of about 8 or 10 people will work through a case of the week, generating learning objectives for themselves, and receiving information through a few selected lectures on the trickier aspects of that case of the week. Both streams have time for clinical and communication skills from year 1, and both streams have community visits from year 1 as well. Now, I need to just say that those aren't happening this term because of COVID, but we're hoping to restart that, but obviously need to wait and see how things are evolving as the COVID pandemic evolves. But hopefully by next year, we will have those firmly back in place. So that's year 1, and then this 5-year stream, you'll see that there are a few more half days for lectures here. So there is less reliance in this stream on self-directed learning and problem-based learning. You do have a case of the week like the 4-year stream, but it's a much shorter, lighter touch group session on a particular case. And then there is much more didactic, that formal teaching with lectures from scientific experts and clinical experts who've walked over from our trust during the week as well. Next slide. So once we get into the transitional, penultimate and final years, in the first 2 years, you will be mainly based at St George's and our 4 local trusts around St George's. That's at Croydon, St Helier, Kingston, mainly. Some pictures of these there. And then as you go out towards the final year, because the GMC requires us to give you some experience of practice in different settings, you may go further afield. So for example, we've got some general practice placements down in Bognor Regis, or some medical experiences down in Chichester. The majority of those placements in the P&F year will be in our 4 or 5 local trusts, which are within an hour of St George's. And we try and alternate students between St George's, which is of course a tertiary trust, and you see very complex cases here, to more peripheral trusts where you'll see more common conditions which you need to get experience of as well. Next slide. So I've mentioned transitional year already. It's a mixture of PBL with our virtual patients in the PBL. Well, you get to do some virtual decision making about patients with clinical attachments, and there are your first clinical attachment in medicine, surgery and general practice. Next slide. The students really enjoy the virtual PBL. these are electronic cases where you get to decide how, as a group, how you care for these patients, and it mimics very closely the process of caring for a patient from diagnosis to management in the clinical ward round. Next slide. In the P year, that's a specialties year, really transformative year, and I see students absolutely change from being quite anxious or nervous or insecure at the start of this year to being really competent doctors in training by the end of the year. So you very much get immersed in medicine and surgery and do the specialties as well. People really enjoying the neurology and psychiatry modules and obstetrics and pediatrics. Next slide. Now we help you navigate through all of this training from year 1 to year 4 or 5 by giving you 15 clinical practice outcomes. And we clearly signpost to you where we like you to be at the end of each year. So I've just put one in here to show you, which is examination. So in the clinical science years, that's year 1 or 1 or 2, we would be teaching you the basics of a system-based examination, for example, the respiratory system. And then each year, as you get more practice, more feedback from clinicians that are seeing you, we expect you to increase your fluency in that examination and be able to then decide which bits of the focus examination you need to do for a particular patient in a particular context. And you'll be proficient at that by the end of final year. So clearly milestone and signpost to you where we want you to be by the end of each year. Next slide. So that's the majority of the curriculum I've talked about. You also have student selected components. Again, you'll find that all medical schools do this. We have them in year 1 and year 2 of the 5-year programme, 1 of the 4-year programme, and then the transitional year and the final year. And they're an opportunity for you to either have a break from scientific subjects and choose something in the humanities or something that interests you or a skill that interests you, or to have a taste of something in a career that you might be interested in future, or you just want to test and see if you're interested in it. And there are all sorts of opportunities from basic science, clinical projects, or quality improvement projects as well. And we have lots of humanities projects as well. So I used to run one called Art, Health and the Environment. There's not one that's run by one of our lecturers, Margot Turner, as well. Now, in normal times, in the final year, you'll do a final year elective, and then you'll be able to go abroad and experience medicine anywhere else in the world, even outside St. George's. Unfortunately, our students this year couldn't do that, but I would hopefully anticipate by the time you're in final year that that will be back on the menu again, and you'll be able to travel to do that. Next slide. For those of you on the 5-year stream who are interested in intercalating, we have about 80 places for intercalation, and this is a selection of the modules that we have available to you. And we've got an increasing number of humanities modules and also master's options if people want to go a level higher in their studying. Next slide. And then finally, that bit that always gets people to sit up. I met our first year students this morning, and they were certainly very interested in the assessments. Again, we have a very straightforward assessment strategy, which involves a knowledge test, a clinical test, and a workplace-based assessment every year of the course. So we have objective structured clinical examinations in every year, and now an online knowledge test as well. The Becoming a Doctor assessment happens on placement as you go through the programme, becoming more complex and a bigger part of the assessment as you go towards the final year. Next slide. And just to remind you, I'm sure you're all aware that there is going to be a national medical licensing examination, which is being devised by the General Medical Council, which all students across the UK will sit, and that's coming in 2024, so 25. So we will be preparing you, and we're already engaged with the GMC in meeting the needs of that examination and matching our curriculum to it already. So we've been working on that for a couple of years, but that will affect you on both streams, really wherever you go for your medical career if you're in England and the UK. Okay, so finally, just want to talk about the welfare support that's around, because medicine is a stressful job for doctors. They need to be able to look after themselves, and we really want you to learn to look after yourself. It's the first competency you need right from the start of the course. I met our first years this morning and talked to them about it, because I think it's been particularly trying for our students who've been working from lockdown. As you will know, if you've been studying for degrees or A-levels over the past few months or doing it at the moment. We've got a wide range of support at St George's. There are senior students who will adopt you as part of their family and look after you. We've got an academic success centre for academic support, academic staff pastoral support, disability officers and careers advisors counselling, all of the things that you would want in a university. And I've just put a slide of Tooting Lido, which is my looking after myself part of life. I go there and have a swim still, and it's open. You can still swim through the winter if you're so interested in doing, if you come to St George's. Next slide. And then finally, we get quite asked quite a lot, what's Tooting like? And I guess I'm quite biased because I've lived here for about 20 years. I really enjoy it. Great people live here. You'll have heard about the kind of diversity of food and the social life that there is around Tooting now, which the students really enjoy. It's very accessible for the rest of London with the Northern Line and transport. And I've got another picture of the Lido here and Tooting Common and the Park Run. I would say in terms of safety, it's like the rest of London. I would take the same precautions that I would expect to take anywhere in London, which is not to walk around quiet streets late at night on my own, etc. Always to be in a group, but I think that would be the same in any part of London that I was living or working in. And I honestly don't think it's any worse, but perhaps the students can fill you in on what their views of that is when they hear from them. Next slide. Okay, so Hannah and myself, Hannah's on holiday, the course director at the moment, but ourselves and the rest of the programme team, which is very big here, have been putting a lot of work into improving satisfaction. And we're very pleased to see that we did move up in the GMC survey. That's a survey of foundation doctors 2019. So we're doing very well with our overall satisfaction. I think we have 90% satisfaction on the MBBS 5 stream with the course overall. And I think the bits of the course that we're most proud of are the clinical placements, the teaching, and the intellectual stimulation. That's what we get very good feedback from students on. There have been problems with organisation and management and assessment and feedback, which I have to say most medical schools struggle with because we have quite hard exams. But again, we're investing and putting money and resources and effort into rescheduling those so that we hope those will go up as well in future. Next slide. So finally, why choose St George's? I would say, first of all, I think we're the only specialist health university, so you will be in a community of people who are passionate about science and passionate about medicine. We have a shared campus with our main partner, NHS Trust. So I can just see over here the helicopter pad, which brings in tertiary care cases to our A&E downstairs, which you might have seen on the TV programmes, etc. I'm very proud that we produce very good doctors who thrive in their careers. And I was at a meeting with the deans from all our local hospitals just after lockdown, and they were saying how fantastic our FY1s had been helping with the COVID crisis in most of the hospitals there, and the George's graduates were really good. So I'm very proud of that. And I would also say that I think the body of students per se are a great bunch of students, and there are lots and lots of opportunities, as you can see from the examples on this slide here, for you to get involved in the Students' Union, and also one of our staff student partnerships, get involved in improving the course with us and learning how to teach medicine in future. I think I'm going to hand over to Laura now. I think that's the end of my talk. So I'll hand over and I'll go off vision here, but hand over to Laura.
Hi, so I just got a few slides to talk you through the admissions process and our criteria, and a couple of slides of multiple mini interviews. Next slide. So I'll just talk you through the entry criteria, but I just want to say that this is all on our website in much more detail than I can present here and is updated. So please go by what's on the website. But I'll start with the graduate entry programme, our 4-year course. So for this, we ask for either an undergraduate degree at a grade of 2-1 or higher, or if you hold a postgraduate degree, that's an MSc or a PhD, then we just require a pass of those because they're not graded. For this 4-year course, we require the GAMSAT examination, which is a science-based examination, and we do set a minimum criteria of 50 in each section. But what we do once we have all the applicants that meet our entry criteria is we order people by their GAMSAT results, and then we select the top 300 to 400 for the M4 course for a multiple mini interview. So just for your information, last year the cutoff for interview was 58 per section average. And then if you were selected for interview, then that interview would be a multiple mini interview, and I'll talk a bit about that. Next slide. So for 2021, we're very pleased to accept both school leavers and graduates onto our 5-year programme for the first year. So for school leavers, we have a GCSE requirement, which is just 5 GCSEs at grade B or above, but must include English language, maths, and double or triple science. And for A-levels, our minimum entry criteria is AAA, but when you receive your offer, it could be between A-star AA or AAA, depending on the circumstances. So we also use the UK Clinical Aptitude Test, the UCAT, to rank our applicants and use that to select those that we invite for a multiple mini interview. So we have a minimum criteria for the UCAT of 500 in each section. We're not currently using the section which is called the situational judgment test because we cover that in our interview. And for reference, in 2020, candidates had scored 2,480 to get an interview with us. I'll talk about this, but we do sometimes offer adjusted entry criteria to those who meet our widening participation criteria. Next slide. I think you just jumped. Oh yeah, here we go. So for graduates onto the 5-year course, we're asking for a 2-1 or higher if you just hold an undergraduate degree, but if you have a postgraduate degree, an MSc or PhD, we'll accept a 2-2 in your undergraduate degree. And again, you'll need to sit UCAT with 500 or above in each section. And this is the first year that we're opening up M5 to graduates, but for the school leavers last year, the cutoff was 2,480 to get an interview. Next slide. So we're committed at George's to widening participation in medicine. This is something we feel really passionately about. And in previous years, we've made adjusted offers to applicants who attended particular schools. And the schools that met these criteria were those that would have a lower average A-level grade overall, and those where pupils at the school progressed into higher education at a lower rate. And you'll find a list of schools that previously met those criteria on our website. However, we're now launching a more detailed contextual admissions programme, and the details of that will be available on the website in the next 2 weeks, I'm told. So that will, in addition to the schools criteria, we are adding some additional criteria to our contextual admissions. And for those applicants that meet this contextual admissions criteria, we may make an offer which is up to 2 grades lower than our published entry criteria. Next slide. So just a couple of slides on multiple mini interviews. This is an interview type which ensures that we're recruiting based on the NHS values, which I'm sure by now you've heard of. We were obviously previously holding these interviews in person, so people would attend on a day and we would have an interview set out in multiple different stations, and there would be an assessor at each station. However, because of the COVID pandemic, we've had to move our MMI assessment programme remote, and we have made the decision that for 2021 we will continue to have remote MMIs rather than in person. So the format for applicants for 2021 is not yet finalised, but what we've been doing in the pandemic is asking applicants to film themselves answering questions which we submit to them. And then the assessors watch the video to assess the questions. In general, it's an 8-station interview with 5 minutes allocated to each station, but as many medical schools run MMIs, this format might differ between medical schools, but that's what we currently do. And we have an icebreaker question, which is the first question, which is generally something along the lines of, why do you want to do medicine? There's one assessor per station, which ensures that we have sort of minimum bias in assessing the MMIs. And our assessors are a mixture of clinical and non-clinical staff. So we try and get a wide range of people assessing the interviews. And they are marked against strict criteria. So the assessors don't have that much bandwidth to make decisions. And so it's really important that you answer the question, that you read the question carefully and answer exactly what we've asked you. Next slide. So I'm sure a lot of you are wondering about work experience, and I'll just preface this with saying we've got lots of information on our website about work experience in the pandemic, but we know that COVID has made it really difficult for you to gain work experience, and therefore, along with other medical schools, we've relaxed our work experience requirements for applicants. We do want you to demonstrate an understanding of the realities of working as a doctor and to show that you have the skills and attributes that we're looking for, but there are lots of alternative ways that you can do this. So the medical school councils have lots of good information on their websites and have produced a guide for medical schools. So they suggest that you use a range of online resources such as websites and journals, that you watch TV programmes about medicine, listen to podcasts, and the key thing here is to reflect on what you're learning and what you're experiencing. So we want to know what you've learned from it, what you think is important, and you can even keep a reflective journal on this over time. The other thing that will count very, very favourably is any volunteering that you've managed to do, whether it's related to medicine or not, it doesn't matter, and being able to reflect on that volunteer work. And also things like care experiences within your family, looking after relatives, siblings, that sort of thing. So you can be really creative by what you count as work experience. And as I said, there's lots of information on our website now. Okay, next slide. Actually, I think this is the spare slide, Natalia, so you can go on to the next one. Okay, so I'm just going to briefly touch on what kind of questions we have in our MMIs. So previously in the in-person MMIs, you may have looked at a picture or watched a video or something like that in the station. But in the remote MMIs, essentially we're giving you a question that's in a written format and you're filming yourself answering that question. So it may be imagining yourself in a situation and how you would manage that. So a classic example would be you're working in a shop or a restaurant, you've got an angry customer for some reason, maybe you've made an error, and how you would diffuse that situation and what solutions you would come up with. And generally in a remote MMI, we're slightly limited as to how we can ask you the question. So it's generally you explaining how you would handle that given situation. Next slide. So there's a couple of other examples. As a captain of a football team, inform a member of the team that you can't select them to play in a championship final. From a list of 15 individuals of various ages, occupations and sex, you can only say 5, which 5 and why. And this is a classic. You've been asked to look after your next door neighbour's cat whilst they go on holiday. Unfortunately, you've run it over with your car. How would you break the news to your neighbour? Next slide. So this is just my last slide, and it's a bit of advice on how to prepare for your MMI. So as I said before, you know, our MMI questions align very closely with NHS values, and you can find these on various NHS websites, such as the Healthcare Careers website. Make sure you understand these values, what they mean, and also reflect in your day-to-day life about how you can demonstrate these values. Look at materials which are relevant to medicine. So the GMC have loads of resources, the Medical School Council have loads of resources. Do lots of reflection on what you've seen in your, I was going to say work experience, because it doesn't obviously have to be straightforward work experience, and your volunteering or whatever experience you've had. Don't learn rote answers. So in the video MMIs in particular, we are not looking for people to read answers into the camera. We want you to pretend that someone's just asked you the question and try and be fairly spontaneous about it. We're looking for authenticity and enthusiasm to do the course. We want to know what your personality is like, who you are, and try and get that to come across in your video MMI. And be honest about your personal qualities. So, you know, play up your skills, great. But if you do think there are areas of development, then that's fine. Just be honest about it, because really we're looking for people who are honest and who know their limitations. And that's it from me, but I'll be available at the end to answer questions as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Laura. I'm now going to introduce you to our student life panelists, and if they could join me on camera. So we have Sheer, who is an MBBS 5 Year 3 student. I think we are hoping that Mohib will join us a bit later. And we've also got Amy, who is on the call as well, who is a MBBS 4 graduate student who's in her second year. So they will be able to give you some further information about student life. So I'm now going to pass over to Sheer, who's going to tell you a little bit more about her student journey at St. George's.
So hi everyone, thank you so much for having me here. I'm Sheer, I'm one of the third year medical students here at St. George's on the MBBS 5 course, so I'm now in my transitional year. I'm just here to tell you a bit about all the different various aspects of student life that I've been involved in my time at St. George's. So first of all, clubs and societies. I've been involved in lots of these since starting at St. George's. The first of which is the boat club. So as a fresher, I learned to row and cox, taught by older pupils in the boat club, and then further went to be a member of the committee. I also got involved in Global Brigades, SGUL, which is our branch of a student-led NGO that works to help impoverished communities abroad. And I spent a lot of my first year fundraising and then went to Ghana to volunteer in a medical clinic there. I'm also really looking forward to being the president of the St. George's Jewish Society in this coming year. And if you have any questions about that, please do let me know in the question panel. So I also got involved in our Students' Union as one of the members of the executive committee. So this involves the SU kind of runs all of the student life aspect of the university. And last year I was one of the events officers for the Students' Union, planning a lot of the events that we hold. And this year I'm going to be one of the charities officers, so choosing the charities and having charities events as part of the Students' Union. In terms of academics, I took part in the summer dissection program in the summer of my first year. So this is an opportunity for about 25 pupils per year to learn to dissect during the summer. And I did this and was able to dissect some of the cadavers in preparation for anatomy teaching for the following year. I also hope to intercalate in future years if I get given a chance to do so. In terms of part-time work, there is some time for that as well. So I'm a student ambassador. And also work on the Students' Union bar, which is a really fun way for me to make money, and it fits around my timetable really well. So I really encourage you to get involved in that, or any other kind of jobs that are available through the university. So another example of that would be working in the Students' Union shop, or working as a demonstrator for either anatomy or clinical skills, which you get to do in later years. In terms of the local area, Coming to live in London seemed pretty intimidating and scary, but living in halls felt extremely safe due to the 24-hour security, and it gave me a really good base from which I could explore the local area, and I really learned to love the area. So I really loved the market, the restaurants, and the local pubs, which are really nice to hang out in. And also I spent time over the summer during lockdown exploring the local parks. So Morden Hall Park is my favourite, and it also has a farm for any animal lovers. My favourite thing, just to wrap up about St George's, is the family feel and how well supported I feel by my societies and also people in years above me, which are genuinely like a family to me. I also have my St George's family, which, if you don't know, is where you get allocated a mum or a dad in the year above, who's there to kind of support you, both academically and socially. And I'm actually a proud mum of 5 St George's kids in the year below, and really hope that maybe some of you will be my grandchildren or my great-grandchildren in years to come. So thank you so much for having me, and I'm going to hand over to Amy now.
Hi, I'm Amy. I'm a third-year medical student. So this is my second year at St George's, so I'm on the graduate entrance medicine. So that means that my first and my second year was both combined into one. So I came to the course with no science background. I don't have an A-level in science. My degree was in English and acting. It was very artsy and humanities. So how did I get here? Well, I kind of gravitated through my career towards social care. And I realised that I loved working with people, but I felt like I wasn't challenged academically. I realised I had an affinity with the hospital and specifically the role of a doctor. I had some really great experience in shadowing doctors. I had a friend who was a doctor, and I just got insight and realised that that was something I wanted to do. I think though before the realization, I didn't think it was an option for me, particularly because I was an older student. Oh, sorry, I was just older, and I didn't feel that I could be a student again. But then I heard about the graduate entrance medicine, which I knew nothing about, and I decided to go for it. It was a big risk for me in terms of financially and professionally. But I just seemed to have this drive and this passion that got me through. And also I knew, and because I'd tasted it, this fulfillment I had, I don't know what it was, but it got me through the GAMSAT, which I don't know if any of you are doing, but I found that extremely grueling. Again, not having a science background, it was quite overwhelming. And the MMIs, which were daunting, but not as daunting for me, given my history. So that, luckily for me, I got into St George's, and I've just experienced my first year. So the first year as a grad med was perhaps a little different from the last person who spoke. It's very intense because the 2 years are in one academically, and perhaps more so because of my history. It was challenging but extremely fascinating, and it is a privilege to hear and get insight of the role of a doctor. But it was like nothing I've ever experienced before. And at times, of course, I felt overwhelmed, but like it was already said, I sought support from academically, how to learn information very quickly, but also the people on the course really made it for me. It is like a family, and because we're all in this environment where we're working quite at such a pace that we just seem to gel and get on, and that is definitely what saw me through that first year. On reflection, if I was to go back over that first year, I would definitely trust St George's in the fact that I believe that they know what they're doing, and if they allow you on the course, then you will get through it, given if you put the application in and you want to, I believe. So that's a little bit about me. Please feel free to ask any questions at the end, and I'll just pass you over to Natalia. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Amy. I'm now going to ask the panel to come back onto camera so that we can answer some of your questions. I've seen that you have all been sending in a lot of questions. That's amazing, but do continue to send them in as we do the Q&A. If I can also ask the student panelists as well to join us, perfect. So our first question is, what type of student thrives at St George's? And I'm going to pass this over to Judith first, and then perhaps Amy, you can follow after that.
Okay, so I think students who thrive at St George's are curious, bright, really wanting to make a difference in terms of healthcare and patient care. They enjoy other people, they enjoy doing things with other people, making a difference, whether that's within medicine or without medicine. And I think they also, if they don't have the skills when they start here, they learn to kind of self-monitor, develop themselves in all of the ways that you need to in order to become a doctor. So I think enthusiastic, curious, committed, passionate about medicine, and really kind of passionate about life in all its respects. Actually, that's what I would say are very good. And I think we've seen two very good examples of that this evening in the students who are here.
Perfect. Do you have anything to add, Amy?
Oh, so I think you pretty much said everything, Judith, but I would probably maybe just say for myself, it was the passion that I had and the persistency, but also looking at my peers, I think a lot of them had really good organisation and were willing to learn and be flexible. And I think the main thing, which I've already said, but it's just working together as a group and wanting to make that difference for others.
Amazing. So we've got another question. What is the community like at St George's? So Cher, maybe you would like to answer that question?
Yeah, sure. So obviously St George's is much smaller of a university than most universities that you'd be looking at otherwise. And this allows for a really family feel. I know as a student, even as a fresher, when I came in, I felt really well supported by the more senior students and members of the university. And it's definitely got a family and community feel, like I mentioned before, with the family system. So the community is, well, very close knit, really gelled together really well. I know every single person on my course, or did before kind of the merging of the years that you get in the transitional year. And even I think the staff and kind of the course team are also really quite close with the pupils in a way that you don't get elsewhere, which is really nice.
Amazing. So I'm now going to pass the question over to Laura. So do you look at EPQs in the undergraduate application?
Sorry, what? Can you say that again?
Sorry, do you look at EPQs in the undergraduate application?
What's an EPQ?
An extended
The personal statement, is it?
Oh, is it the personal statement?
So no, an EPQ I think is an individual qualification. Yeah, it's different from an A level, but it's an additional kind of piece of work or qualification that people can do, which is essay.
Okay. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but we have a lot of equivalent qualifications that we take. So we have a list of them on our website, and if it's not on our website, sometimes we do get quite esoteric qualifications. Then we look them up and we make a decision on a case-by-case basis.
Amazing. So this one is for, I'll pass that over to Judith and Amy. So what makes graduate medicine at St George's stand out from other universities? So perhaps Judith, you want to take that first?
Okay, well, I think we were one of the first graduate schools that started. I can't remember, I think one started before us, but we're certainly the first one that took non-science students, and I've been here since we started, really. So I'd say we have now 20 years experience of producing graduates. I think, as Amy said earlier, I think we're very clear about the sorts of students who will enjoy our programme, and we really enjoy the kind of diversity and variety of skills that the graduates bring to the whole experience of medicine at St George's. I think in terms of what makes it stand out, I think our experience at getting people through the science, if they're not a scientist first. So I think we're confident. We've got a well-structured course that's tried and tested in terms of doing that. And I think the other thing that our graduates really enjoy about St George's is the kind of teaching and feedback they get on clinical placements. As I've said before, we're co-located. I can see the hospital just 20 meters away from the office on the 6th floor where I am here, and so there's a great traverse of consultants through to the medical school and students over to the hospital as well, and the teaching at St George's and our partner sites, where we have very strong communications and skill exchanges with the trusts locally, are very good, and so students get a really good time on the clinical placements. And I think whatever their age or whatever their background, students feel respected, feel able to ask, feel able to say if they don't know something, and that they learn immensely from those placements. So I think those are probably the two things that stand out. I think Amy's alluded to a third thing, which is that there's always a really good community feel amongst the graduates. So very strong connections between them as they go through the course. And I know from students who've passed through that they keep in touch with each other as they progress through their postgraduate careers as well. So they're always a great bunch of students as well. Amy, I don't know if you want to add anything.
I think you said most of the thoughts that I had, but perhaps just that it's because it's in central London as well, and it's in such a diverse place. Then the medical cases are quite interesting as well, and you get a lot of insight from that. Also, the fact that it's which you said it's quite forefront in the terms of who it invites into the university. I feel like there's a great diversity in my year alone, and that's really interesting too. And that's it.
Amazing, thank you. So I've got two questions for Shira actually. So one, what is life like around tutoring after COVID-19? And we also have another question about nightlife near the campus. How is that?
Okay, so obviously quite a bit has changed since the pandemic. The biggest thing that's changed is everything is a little bit quieter. It's probably not as quiet as it is outside of London, and I would say there's still a little bit of hustle and bustle in the streets. But yeah, there's a lot that has quieted down over the last couple of months. I personally got to explore different areas of tutoring that I hadn't before. Like I mentioned before, the local parks, there's lots of them, and they all go in different directions. So that's been a bit livelier. In terms of nightlife, we've got our Students' Union bar, which is located in the university itself. And that's currently open Wednesdays to Fridays, but normally open all 5 days of the week. And that's kind of got a lot cheaper drinks than what you would find in the rest of the area. There are also local pubs. And when the time comes for clubs to open, there's also a local club called the Tooting Tram. There are cocktail bars, there are restaurants, there are lots of opportunities for non-drinkers also to go out and explore the local restaurants. We've got a very diverse community with a lot of different foods available. Yeah, so there's lots, and I'm happy to answer more specific questions if you can think of anything that I haven't covered.
Amazing, thank you so much. So I've got another question for Laura. Is virtual work experience valued equally or as much as in-person work experience, I think, given COVID-19?
Yeah, that's a great question, and the answer is definitely yes. Like, I think for most people it's been impossible in the last 6 months to get direct work experience, and so we just don't have that requirement for 2021's intake. So just follow the guidance on our website, read as much as you can about medicine, listen to podcasts, watch TV programs, and reflect on that, and think about what your life experience is, what life experience you've got that is about caring and compassion and aligns with NHS values. And definitely that is what we're looking for, and you won't be marked down for not having direct clinical work experience.
Amazing. We've got another question which I'm going to direct to Judith. So does St. George's perform dissections on cadavers when teaching anatomy?
Okay, so that was a question about how we teach anatomy, is that right?
Yeah, do we perform dissections on cadavers?
Yeah, so not all students will do the actual dissection itself. So we are one of the few medical schools that still has a dissecting room, and we've got surgical demonstrators, we've got anatomy lecturers there as well. What happens is that over the summer each year, we select some anatomy student tutors who, under the supervision of the anatomy lecturers, will do pro-sections. So they will dissect the cadavers so that the anatomy can be demonstrated to students when they come into the DR in the subsequent academic year. Then the teaching that's done for anatomy for the medical students in year 1 and year 2 and in T year is that students will typically have a lecture to orientate them towards the anatomy or have some preparatory material on our virtual learning environment for a session, and then they will go into the dissecting room in groups of about 6 or 8 to a cadaver, and the anatomy demonstrators who've been trained the previous summer will demonstrate the different structures on the cadavers in the dissecting room. So that's the part of the dissecting room, but of course we've got virtual anatomy sort of 3D resources through the library as well. So there's a lot of additional resource that you can use to learn the anatomy as well as the dissecting room. So in summary, not all students will do dissection. Those who are interested apply and are selected will do dissection if they choose to do so during a summer holiday and become anatomy tutors in the subsequent year. But all students will go in and have pro-sections, that is previously dissected cadavers, demonstrated to them when they're doing the appropriate bit of anatomy.
Amazing. So I've got another question for Laura. So do we accept gap year students after A-level? And I'm going to tag on another question which we do get asked frequently. So does it, I guess, affect an applicant if they are taking a gap year in their application?
No, it doesn't affect at all. In fact, it probably gives you more of a chance to get life experiences to reflect on, to tell us about in your interview. It can help you to become a more confident applicant if you already know that you've achieved the grades that you need to get in. I didn't attend George's, but I did apply after my A-levels in my gap year, and I just found when I went to interview that I had more to talk about. So yeah, it's definitely not going to go against you, and it might even be a plus. It also means if you've already got your grades that you can apply at a different time of year. You can apply in early clearing if you already have your qualifications, which is sort of early summer 2021.
Amazing. So we've had quite a few questions for Amy regarding actually taking the GAMSAT and being from a non-science background. So the first one is, how did you find taking the GAMSAT from a non-science background? And I'm going to try and just scroll through the questions to see if there's any other bits about that they'd like to find out. But if you could tell, I guess, people a bit about your experience taking the GAMSAT.
Yes, sure. So I actually took it twice. So the first time I didn't pass. And I went to a place called GradMed in London, so it was a course, and that was really good, and that helped me and it advanced me to. But a lot of what I found I did was on YouTube, on getting books, on my own personal research. I also laid out a good plan, so I was really committed about it, and I wanted to have a good foundation because my hope eventually was to get in. So I also went in with the attitude of really trying to do it in a logical and practical way. But of course, life, I had to live as well. But I found that having that sort of plan really helped. Like I said, I did need support from outside and took on a course. But I think that was more to help me with the timing of the GAMSAT because it was so time pressured, and also just some of the questions and the way they were asked. I just needed someone who had more insight in order to tackle them in the time that we had. So I would recommend, if I was to do it again, I definitely recommend the YouTube videos that go through the questions, the GAMSAT questions that come out. I also formed a small group of people, so we'd talk online, so work with people if you can find them. I found mine personally through the course, but I think there are the ways that you can find other people who are doing the same process. That really helped, and it helped with confidence as well, and a good plan, and sort of almost like a medium long-term goal to get you there. Yeah, thanks.
Amazing, thank you. So we've got two questions that I'm going to pose to you, Judith. So one is, how early do clinical placements occur and how often? And the other one is, when does patient interaction start? And again, how often? So very similar, or maybe could be intertwined.
Sorry, can you just repeat the last bit?
Yeah, so the first question is, how early do clinical placements occur? How early do clinical placements occur? And how often? And another one is, when does patient interaction start?
Okay. So on both streams, so this is in non-COVID times, because unfortunately before Christmas we're not going to have any patient interaction, certainly before Christmas, and we're waiting to see what happens before we plan that after Christmas, because obviously patients are vulnerable around COVID, and so are not looking for any additional interactions at the moment. So in normal times, on the 4-year stream, you will have 9 visits into a general practice, which starts within weeks of the course, 2 or 3 weeks of the course. You'll go to your general practice and you'll have half a day of learning in the practice, around patients in the practice, around the topic of the week that you're doing in PBL, and those are interspersed throughout the first year. The students really enjoy that. They have a very good longitudinal relationship with the GP and enjoy the clinical experience. And in addition to that, there are some community visits. So, for example, one of our common ones would be to go to a sickle cell support group and talk to people who have sickle cell disease about their experiences of healthcare as well. So there are additional community visits. On the 5-year stream is a little bit different. Again, first patient contact in normal non-COVID times would be within the first 3 or 4 weeks of the course. That would be going to talk to a patient in primary care, again with a chronic condition, about their experience of healthcare, and for the students to learn, start taking histories from those patients and practicing those skills on real patients that they've learned in the clinical and communication skills sessions. So they have 2 or 3 visits in over the first term, and then in year 2 they again have some more primary care visits, and again this time do a sort of slightly longitudinal piece of work with a patient, sometimes a patient who's pregnant, but it could be a patient with a chronic disease, following them up over a period of time and seeing how their care is delivered and what the experience of the patient is. But in addition, on the 5-year stream, we have what we call the early years clinical experience, which is some time which starts in semester 2, which is post-Christmas normally of the first year, where you will have time in care of the elderly, medicine, radiology and surgery. So those are very early placements in a hospital environment, and the idea of those is to familiarise you with the hospital environment, with the interactions between doctors and their patients, and doctors, very importantly, with the rest of the clinical team looking after those patients, so that when you then go onto the wards in the T year, you're very familiar with it. That 2 weeks in semester 2 is then repeated in semester 3 and semester 4. So you'll alternate between those specialties that I talked about earlier as you go into the second year. I think you might be on mute, Natalia. Are you on?
Apologies, didn't want everyone to hear me writing the questions down. So we've got a kind of another question about which I'm going to direct to Shir. So can I still have a good work-life balance?
Definitely would be my answer. As you probably noticed from my presentation, I had a lot of life in my first 2 years at St George's, and I still did what I would say is very well academically. So I think it's definitely possible to balance your work and your life. There's lots of opportunities to get involved, and the great thing about being at a healthcare university is that we're all in the same boat. So joining clubs and societies, everyone has the same kind of workload that you do, and that means that you can have a life and have things outside of the course whilst also being with people who are able to understand, work around your schedule, and support you in revision. So for example, I mentioned the boat club, which is the rowing club here at the university, and through the boat club we also get academic sessions where older years will then teach the younger years things or run mock exams for us. So it's a really good fusion of the two. There's so much that you can get involved in, so many different societies and different activities, different clubs, the Students' Union, as I mentioned as well. So there's lots to get involved in, and it's all very local. So there's not a very long commute, for example, between your lectures and where you might be seeing different societies, or even the Students' Union bar. Like I said, it's right in the university. So cutting out that travel time also really increases the opportunities for a work-life balance. I think, just to summarize, as long as you stay organized and stay on top of what things you are required to do, it's really easy to kind of balance. It's not easy, but it is definitely possible to balance that with all of the extracurricular activities that you might be wanting to do.
Amazing, thank you. Amy, do you have anything to add from a graduate medicine perspective?
It's definitely possible. I've got to say, for me personally, I was challenged in that way at the beginning because it was so overwhelming, and that's actually something that I saw my personal tutor about, and then that changed for me. Certainly this year now, I feel like I've got through the bulk of the academic work, that the life-work balance is becoming so much more, and it's so much more satisfying this year. But yeah, I did need some help with that, but it's definitely possible. And I know from people on my course, my life social balance was pretty much, I was socializing while I was working in my first year. So yeah.
Can I just say something there, Natalia, actually? Just to say, I think the other aspect of this is that we have a very active student, parent and carer empowerment group called Space, and we've got a lot of parents and carers on both the 4-year stream and the 5-year stream, and they are also like Amy, who's really well organised, really approached the graduate programme in a really fantastic way. But they also, because of their caring responsibilities, tend to be a very well organised group. But I think the fact that they do it and they manage it and they do really well just shows that it is possible to have a work-life balance. And I think, again, it shows, all of those competencies that you all will bring into medicine from your own lives. Some of those are very transferable into managing a medicine course. And if you're a parent or carer, you're used to compartmentalizing life and getting on with things and being very efficient. And I think that really helps with the medical program as well.
Amazing. So I've now got a question for Laura, which I think probably is just to, I guess, clarify a bit on your presentation. So with widening participation, will I be at a disadvantage if I come from a grammar or independent school?
No, absolutely not. So we just have criteria for schools which are underperforming, and if you are studying your A-levels at one of those schools, you may be eligible for an adjusted offer. But other than that, we don't take your school into consideration.
Great. And we've got a couple more questions for you. So does SGUL rank students according to UCAT and choose the top rankers? And also people want to know, how do we use the personal statement, or if we use the personal statement? Okay, so I'll start with that. We don't use the personal statement. So I know you probably put a lot of time and effort into writing it, but it's not part of our admissions process. So for the 5-year course, we use the UCAT, and yes, we do rank
our applicants by their UCAT score, and we select the top 800 to 1,000 to interview for the 5-year course. And similarly, for the 4-year course, we rank applicants by their GAMSAT score, and we invite the top 300 to 400 for an interview.
Amazing. We've also got a question for Judith. Is it possible to intercalate to another university if you have a master's degree or you're interested in another university but it's not offered at St George's?
Yeah, so it is possible to do that. So there's a process every year where students will apply to intercalate, and a few students are allowed to externally intercalate. It tends to be determined by academic performance and, as you say, issues as to whether there are other courses available at other places. So it's not a lot of students that we allow to intercalate externally, but we do allow some. And you know, particularly if you've already got a BSc, then going for a master's makes sense. If you've already completed the first, second and transitional year of the 5-year programme, you're considered, you've got the equivalent of an undergraduate degree then, and again, if you wanted to, you could choose to intercalate by going for a master's either internally at St George's or externally. We've got an increasing menu of masters at St George's. Actually, we've got a very active postgraduate taught and research programme, and some new masters that have come on. So, for example, global health is very, very popular with students internally and externally as well. So people can choose to go onto those George's programmes as well as have a look outside.
Amazing. And we've got another question. Is there an age, any age requirement for the undergraduate medicine course? Sorry, can I join at 17 years of age?
So we're currently reviewing our under 18 policy, and we haven't yet published it. But I know from a discussion today that you have to be aged 18 to do any sort of clinical placement. So I would think we may consider on a case-by-case basis, but I would think that 18 is probably the cutoff.
Amazing, thank you. Somebody has asked, how do we view D of E? So perhaps another one for you, Laura.
It depends if you can weave it into your answer in the MMI, and if you can reflect on your experiences and they're valuable, and you talk about teamwork, I guess, and other experiences you've had as part of your D of E. It's not something that we consider on its own, but certainly any sort of experience like that is going to be really helpful for your interview.
Amazing. And I think this will probably be our final question, which I will direct to Amy first and then perhaps Sheer next. So what would you say is the most difficult stage of getting into medicine? So Amy, if you want to answer that one first.
Probably the beginning, actually, just the belief and the going with the courage of your conviction, and just starting those steps and just building the confidence with yourself. I think the GAMSAT was also a big stage for me in terms of getting in. Yeah, those two.
Amazing. Sheer?
Yeah, I think it's very different for everyone depending on kind of what your journey in is. For me, the hardest part was the rejections, to be honest. I got rejected from multiple places, and it's about having the self-belief and the passion to know that you are resilient enough and that you can continue to apply and just apply again and again. And for me, it was kind of a thing of however long it takes. But yeah, I think overcoming that thing of understanding that although it's hard and that rejections don't necessarily reflect the fact that you're not suitable as for the degree. So I got rejected from many places, but I genuinely feel very much that I'm in the right place and that I'm doing the right thing for me. So I would say that's the hardest part.
Amazing. So I'd like to thank our panel Laura, Judith, Sheer and Amy for being here with us today and sharing all their wisdom about St George's and hopefully giving you all the information that you need to continue with your application to us. I'd like to thank you guys for being here. We hope this has been really informative and helpful. We'll be sending out an FAQ after the session to give you further information, answer some of those questions that we didn't get around to in this session because there was so many. As I mentioned at the beginning of the session, we've got some other webinars coming up, in particular our Student Finance and Admissions webinar on the 7th of October. And it also takes place in November as well, so it's on our website. And I know a few of you had questions about student finance. That'd be a great place to come along and find out those answers. And somebody also asked about open days, offer holder days and campus stores. Obviously, given the current guidelines, we're not currently running those at the moment. However, do keep an eye on our website for any future activities that we're running or things that we might be doing to kind of share a bit more about St George's and the campus with you. So I'd like to thank you for attending and have a great evening. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.